The campaign you're most proud of.
Oh, there's been thousands of campaigns. The most recent one, I think there's, I kind of alluded to this um, with how we use data clean room, but via rail and like the via rail campaigns that I've worked on the last year, especially the way how we've matured and progressed some of the capabilities for data clean room and measuring ticket sales from ad exposures is like I think this is kind of the thing that I'm very keen on, and what I've probably in the recency bias of my experience tells me that like this is probably one of my more favorite things, or favorite campaigns you could say.
Your favorite movie.
Too tough. Yeah, I love Fight Club. I think if anything, like Fight Club as it existed over like maybe 20 years ago, um, as relevant as it was then as it is today, especially for especially in understanding today's like contemporary political landscape relative to like a masculine viewpoint, um, or point of view, like so relevant.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
I would say Jeffrey Wright. Um, he's the like American, like the American agent in the newer James Bond movies. Um, but he also plays a character. He plays one of the main characters in Westworld. That actor would look similar, but more so than like my wife, and I even agree that like his mannerisms and how he acts are very similar to the way how I am.
My follow-up, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
It'd either be called Humor Me or Can I Have a Moment, or even combine the two, Humor Me for a Moment.
Your favorite book?
These are really hard. More recently, I read a book called "I've Been Meaning to Tell You" by David Chariandi. He's a local author. Um, Similar upbringing to mine. He's Trinidadian descent, but it's basically like a letter to his daughter about his experience growing up in basically the GTA. He's also now like an accomplished academic and writer, but this book I read cover to cover twice in the day that I got it. Fantastic book.
Your favorite song?
There's two really like it's hard to pick. So one that like I'll like for my wife, it'll be "Karma Police" by Radiohead. This is the song we bonded on, in the way how I think we were sitting around in a lunchroom with some coworkers many years ago, and Radiohead was coming to Toronto, and I think it was in the Star and "Don't Hate Me Globe." I read the Star. They said they're coming to town. Can anyone recognize? Can anyone memorize, or does anyone recall the lyrics to "Karma Police"? And then you'd be like a real Radiohead fan. And so at that point, uh, I had recited the lyrics, and back then, my coworker, who is now my wife, uh, we were the only two that knew all the lyrics for "Karma Police." But to add that in, like De La, I know by De La Soul has a huge influence on who I am as a person growing up, who I am today. Like, not quite the same story, but it has had longevity throughout the 30 plus years of my life.
Best advice you've ever received?
I'd have to like credit Malcolm X. This is like a thing in my family about, and his quote is, "Education is a passport to your future." This is in the essence of almost every Caribbean household, um, that I've visited or been a part of growing up, and today. Like I think this is like a really important part to someone's like current understanding of themselves and future understanding of themselves. And I don't mean like education as a means of like commercial success. Education as a means of being a better contributor and being more active in your community.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Oh, I remember one time, I think it was like 2011, I was sitting around with a friend and we were considering putting like $500 into buying Bitcoin at 30 cents back then.
Oh, jeez.
I would have been wildly wealthy at this point in my life. I wish I would go back and had done things differently then. But I think, if anything, the advice I give myself is that like life is too short to be hung up on our differences, and it's really important to me.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
Oh, definitely. I've thought about this a lot. If I didn't have to work in media, I didn't have to work anymore. I'd probably have a cattle like a cattle farm that also raised pasture chickens. It's like barbecuing is kind of like a passion and craft that I have. And I think through the appreciation of this craft, I've learned how to work with like really good ingredients, and doing so, like I like kind of like dabbled with like butcher apprenticeship, and doing so, then you learn about like the importance of how animals are raised, and the quality of life that they have. And so I don't know if I don't know if I'm always going to eat meat in my life, but I know that for some people that'll be a staple for them. But I think that um, being very conscious about your consumption, and the ethical treatment of animals is really important, and having a transparent supply chain of how we bring meat from a farm to table is really important, and how we have an appreciation for the food that we eat.